Beginning the week of September 14th, 2015, the City of Columbus will only collect garbage once per week. Your pickup day will be the exact same day as your current recycling collection, as shown here on this color-coded map of Columbus. If you do not know your recycling collection day or need more information concerning the changes, dial 311, or if calling from a cell phone, call 706-653-4000.
Columbus, Georgia, this is your City Council. Mayor Teresa Tomlinson. City Manager Isaiah Hughley. Pop Barnes, District 1. Glenn Davis, District 2. Bruce Huff, District 3. Evelyn Turner Pugh, Mayor Pro Tem and District 4. Mike Baker, District 5. Gary Allen, District 6. Mimi Woodson, District 7. Tom Buck, District 8. Judy Thomas, Post 9 at-large counselor. Skip Henderson, Post 10 at-large counselor. Tiny Washington, Clerk of Council. And City Attorney Clifton Fay. Columbus, Georgia, this is your City Council.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July 28th meeting of the Columbus City Council. We're so glad to have you with us this evening. We've got a good amount of business to do. We hope you are surviving the heat and humidity of your summer, and we're going to go ahead and jump on in with inviting Pastor Jeremy Rands, the pastor of Grace Baptist Church, to the podium to start us off on the right foot in a manner consistent with his faith tradition. Reverend Rands, it's so good to have you here.
Thank you. Let's pray together this evening. Our Father in heaven, we come to you this evening, and this council needs your wisdom, and they need knowledge. They have decisions that must be made, and we know that all wisdom comes from you. And so I pray they would seek wisdom from you this evening. I pray that you would give them unity. I pray the decisions made would be best made for the citizens of this community. We pray that you would bless this meeting, bless each person that's represented here. Thank you for folks like this, men and women that are willing to serve our community. And I pray that you bless their families for that as well. We ask you this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so very much. We appreciate all that you do for this community and all those the congregants of Grace Baptist Church do as well. So thank you. We have a treat tonight. We have Girls Inc. representatives here, and I'm going to call them forward to stand in front of the clerk's desk, and they're going to help lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you all will go ahead and stand as they come to assemble. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, let's give them a round of applause. All right, don't go anywhere. We want you all to tell us your name and how old you are.
Zakiria, and 11 years old. My name is Marari, and I'm 11 years old. My name is Bailey, and I'm 8 years old.
My name is Takayla, and I'm 9 years old.
My name is Reagan, and I'm 7 years old.
My name is Chisum, and I'm 10 years old.
Well, you guys did a really great job, and I know you have some fun programs going on in the summer camp over at Girls Inc. And just to let the community know, this past week, Girls Inc. handed out $15,000 in scholarships to Girls Inc. participants who are going on to college. So maybe someday I'll be there and we'll be there as they hand out checks to you all when you go to college. All right? Let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you, ladies. Come back and see us again soon. And thank you, sir, for all you do. Appreciate you and Girls Inc. so very much. All right, we have a couple of updates, very important updates. We want to call forward Gary Jones with the Chamber of Commerce first to speak to us about Fort Benning. of course, an essential part of our community. And Gary, we appreciate what you and the Chamber and the rest of the community is doing to help us make Fort Benning big and bold and prosperous. So,
thank you, Madam Mayor, and Madam Mayor, members of City Council, Madam Deputy City Manager, and Mr. City Attorney. I thank you for this opportunity to bring you up to date today, because I try to take away the myth and the rumor and to have you have the facts going forward. Obviously, you see on the first slide all the entities that come together from both the private sector and the public sector to focus on Fort Benning, and you'll see a new thing up there that we need as a body, all of us, to stop sequestration. This is the area we focus on. That's our region, because obviously is a far-reaching impact when you realize the sphere of influence of Fort Benning, Georgia. When we go and you take a snapshot of Fort Benning, the reality is on any given day you have about 41,000 folks come to work out there every day, and that doesn't include the 9,000 to 12,000 that are in training. So you're talking with a community out there every day of 50,000 people that come to work there every single day. Used to bring in about $5.5 billion, and with that we're about to do a study to see what the impact as a result of some forecasted losses we see in the future. It's easy to confuse the term drawdown, Budget Control Act, sequestration, and people use them interchangeably. What I've attempted to do on this very complex issue is that area that is in black, that will occur and be completed by the end of September this year. Your Army will have drawn down from 570 down to 490,000. There's no debate, there's no dialogue, there's no we'd like you to consider. It is going to happen. In fact, the Army is currently at about 496,000. The next area there in blue is Phase 2 that we just saw the immediate results of, and that's the continued drawdown of the military, in which it went out and it said, okay, we're now going from 490,000 down to 450,000. That'll be completed by the end of September 2017. We can still influence that. We can still influence that, but it's a function of budget. The reason that I'll point these two things out, and you'll see the bracket that brings them together showing 120,000, is that people can have numbers say many things. You just have to make sure you're asking the correct question. For instance, recently the military was cut, Army was cut 40,000. Fort Benning was impacted by 3,402. And you say that's an inordinate amount. Please keep in mind this council played a huge role in the first phase when the Army reduced itself by 80,000, and through your efforts and through the efforts of the support in Washington and the community in the region, we actually had growth at Fort Benning when brigades were cut and other installations throughout there. So let's keep things in perspective, that you say, what's the impact of us losing 3,402 of a drawdown of 120,000, which is slightly over 2%. Now, every person loss is important. Every person loss is critical. But we want to keep things in perspective. The next issue is sequestration. There's a whole separate issue that deals with sequestration. But if sequestration goes in effect on the 1st of October of this year, your Army, the Department of Defense, will receive an additional $500 billion cut. Keeping in mind the Army's piece of a $487 billion cut was $120,000. Can you fathom what's going to happen when Defense is cut another $500 billion on top of that? So obviously we have a whole battle we have to fight on sequestration, and the issue comes up on BRAC. For the first time there's an indicator in our Congress that BRAC can become a feasibility, because in the current budget is going forward, a draft budget going forward, the Congress has allowed the services go forward and for the first time to come back with an inventory of their assets. Before that, they couldn't plan, they couldn't get a complete inventory, anything. So for the first time, the prohibition has been released. They haven't said you can have a BRAC, but the prohibition has been released for them to do that. But I'd like to go the next step. For those that believe it's just a smoke and mirrors game, every one of those circled brigades, this body played a huge role and Fort Benning having growth, because every one of those circle brigades, they went away. And at the end of September this year, the last of those brigades will be away. Those two squared areas that you would see at Fort Benning, and also you see in Alaska, is where a brigade was taken in part and left to Infantry Battalion Task Force, and I'll go in more detail on that. I submit to this group, that is no accident. An Infantry Battalion Task Force remained. In fact, the issues are going on for we're attempting to get that task force commanded by a full colonel versus a lieutenant colonel. Thus, if it ever has to expand rapidly, you have the command and control already in place, and those things are going on in the background. Everyone says, this doesn't make a bit of sense. Has anyone not looked and seen the threat? Please understand the size of your military has nothing to do with national strategy. I wish to say that again. The size of your military has nothing to do with national strategy. It has everything to do with the budget. The budget is such that the military by law had to become smaller. Just this week, the Chief of Staff of the Army said we never basically should have gone below 490,000, but he had no choice because the law says you can only get so much money and your military can be just so big. So please, please do not ever begin to fathom that the best defense for this nation reflects the military we have there. It's the best defense for this nation that can be established based on the budget that's established. Now, I'd like to walk you through what's really happened because there's quite a bit of things. Number one, the 3rd Brigade is about, I have to look back here a little bit, it's about 4,400, almost 4,500 folks. It's received a cut of 3,402 positions. That's a key word. I want to come back to it because you all expect me to pay great attention to every word that they put out. That's not your job. That's what you pay or you support me in doing. They said that the Army says the salary's lost. You can see for that for yourself as well as you can see that. The thing that I would like to say is someone asked what was I going to do today. I said I was going to talk about the bad, the good, and the ugly. Not the good, bad, and the ugly. The bad we've seen. The good I want to talk about right now a little bit. And when you look at the retained on the 1,050, those would have gone away at any other time except by the influence that this body brought to bear communicating with the leadership in Washington. And we also have an entity that we have on contract that's working for us in Washington. When that 1,050 stayed here, you can start seeing the salary buying power that stayed in this area, and you can also see the sales that will stay in this area. So you, as a body, were able to go out and influence and retain almost $93 million a year more into this area than anybody else. Had you not done what you've done and been actively involved, you would have lost entirely. Also, when you start looking at a whole, when you say that you're dealing with 1,050 soldiers, I used Army analogy. None of these are Gary Jones's numbers. They're all dealing with the analogy that the Army produced in a study. But you can see where you basically have out of 1,400 soldiers and civilian jobs that we were able to keep because those induced jobs have been gone away. So we were able to keep a population of about 3,500 in this area that would have left once you consider spouses and family members. But I want to talk about positions cut. When the Army announced what happened, it said they're cutting 3,402 positions. It did not say they're cutting 3,402 soldiers. But they went and they looked at that brigade and we say we're going to reduce the size of the positions in that brigade by 3,402. There was one battalion in that brigade that was to stand up and be created that never stood up. So the reality is, instead of us having 3,402 soldiers walk away, it's really closer to 2,400. And there's some other issues. So that's good news on that as all. So that when you look there, and you look here at the salaries projected to be lost, and you look at the sales projected to be lost, you can start reducing that by about a third. So that's good news, and those good news are happening as a result of everybody's effort here. But I want to talk about something else that you expect your Chamber of Commerce and you expect the Valley Partnership and an entity called the Columbus Chattahoochee Coalition to do. And that we've been actively involved with our leadership in Washington, and we're in the process of saying, hey, Army, let's go and establish an agreement that if you ever have to decide to expand rapidly, that's your first priority is at Fort Benning to expand that infantry battalion task force. Then at the same time, we're saying, hey, you've had a plus up at Martin Army Community Hospital on leadership, but that's lost on leadership in civilian positions out there. Then we go and you start seeing that where we're actively having our leadership negotiating with the Defense Department to say, why don't you set aside ideally 12 to 14 million a year for about 4 years, and during that time we can turn around and hire defense contractors. That a person may decide to leave the service and then turn around and be hired as a defense contractor. And also at the same time we have that focus on two really key elements out at Fort Benning, research and development as well as range control operations. So rather than us just sitting back and say, son of a doggone, I hate that happened to us, we're actively involved in saying we're going to get positive and good to come out of this. But the first thing, as things become confused, that area that's got the black around it, that all deals with that 120,000 drawdown. And that's not to be confused about anything. That's 120,000 that's drawn down. The first 80,000 is a fact. We've got a chance to still influence somewhat that other 40,000. The next thing is sequestration. We can influence that. But we have to make sure all our elected leadership in Washington know that we will not accept sequestration staying in effect. And it's just plain as simple as that. Now, if we don't do anything, we've already been touched of about 3,000. We're going to have about 10,000 more people, jobs. That's much larger than that. You start dealing with about 24,000 we're going to be impacted by. So I want to put it in comparison. I had a smart person once tell me, say, Gary, you can talk generalities, you can talk region, but it has to get personal. As a result of guidance from Troy Wood and Jerry Newman, we did analysis. And what the whole analysis comes down to is if we do nothing and we let that total drawdown occur at Benning that's projected based on sequestration, that is greater than if all the employees in Muskogee County that work for Columbus State University, Total Systems, and AFLAC, it actually would be to the advantage to protect the military and let all those jobs go. Because that's 9,000 jobs impacted by those three great entities in this county that work here in this county. But what's about to happen at Fort Benning is 4,000 larger than that. And if we let happen what's going on at Fort Benning, when you compare it to all those employees and all those salaries, you're going to still lose over $55 million a year more. So all of a sudden this becomes real personal here, that when you get a scope of comparison of losing all the employees in Muskogee County, of Columbus State, Total Systems, and AFLAC, pales in comparison to what happens at Fort Benning if we let that occur. Now, we're not going to do that. And there's a site up there, and I want to thank the mayor for placing this site on her Facebook because she is reaching out there. We can't ask the city government to place this on their site because you draw federal funds. And so we can't ask you to do that. But we can tell you, if you're part of a company, if you have your own Facebook page, if you have any of that, you can sure put it on there and you can drive it out there. I'm talking to real estate entities, I'm talking to car dealerships, I'm talking to a lot of large entities to get that on there. We've got over 1,700 signatures to date. Our mark is to get 25,000. And every time all they have to do is put their email address and their name and hit send, and it goes to every elected official in Washington, in Georgia, and Alabama. And that is in place and it's working. I thank you for your time and pending your questions. I appreciate this opportunity to update you.
Let's see, we have Councilor Thomas.
Thank you, Gary, for this update. I had a question on the slide that you showed us where it said that we're talking about the the Phase 2 drawdown. There. It says there that Benning is going to lose some number of civilian spaces, and we don't know what that number is yet.
That is correct, ma'am.
Using your crystal ball, is there a parallel between the number of civilians that we're going to lose as compared to the number of soldiers that we're losing? I mean, we've lost 3,400 soldiers. Is there some connection with those numbers or
The
not?
17,000 would have to go against the additional 40,000. So that would almost be just probably about 42%. But there are a lot more civilians in the military spread out throughout the military than are soldiers, because you have many headquarters that are really civilian heavy. So by just working a straight line analysis, it would give a disproportionate number. I can tell you there's confusion, because I had one county commissioner call to elected officials' office in Washington and say, I see where we've been cut 3,402. Well, what about sequestration? The answer was, oh, no, that's the max that could occur with sequestration. Well, that shows how little they understand that. Because the 3,402 is based on just the Phase 2 and has nothing to do with sequestration.
And we don't have an idea yet of how many civilian positions we'll lose at Fort Benning.
No, ma'am, we do not. I can tell you that one thing to help get that analysis, both deputy city managers were in a meeting today where we had representatives from the Office of Economic Adjustment out of Washington that's come down and offered up the opportunity to help this region and help the communities, and specifically the economic centers, go and conduct some studies to get a better feel for the total impact of what's going to occur. Because at this point we just have an Army analogy, but we look like we'll get some support in that area today. And I thank the City of Columbus for hosting this meeting today, too. It brought many entities in from Fort Benning, as well as brought in entities from Phoenix City for this meeting.
Well, I want to certainly express my thanks, and I think the thanks of the community to you for your work on this and your untiring efforts to make sure that, number one, we have the information that we need, and then that you help us decide what to do with that information and where to go.
I'm a simple part of a team.
And
well, the team effort that's made everything happen.
I understand that, but I also understand that team has a leader, and we appreciate your efforts, Gary.
That should strike fear in everybody's heart. that thought alone.
Not at all.
Thank you.
All right, Gary. Well, excellent job. I think
Thank
you've made
you.
it very clear, and we'll continue to post. I saw some folks nodding, so I expect that you'll see the Grow Fort Benning website link on various Facebook pages, and we'll ask everybody to spread the word. So thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All right, next we have the PATH Foundation update. We're going to invite Betsy Covington, who's the director of the Community Foundation of Chattahoochee Valley, and of course Ken Henson, who also facilitates in many capacities, but certainly sits on a bicycle commission that we have. So, Betsy, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you guys for letting me come today. And I am joined by Ken Henson, who's currently the board chair of the Community Foundation and also the advisory committee chair for the Friends of the Greenway Trail Fund that exists at the Community Foundation. As most of you know, the Community Foundation is now a $120 million public foundation geared toward helping people use the tools of philanthropy to improve their communities now and forever. And you've heard a lot from me in the past year about how Columbus has momentum. We want Columbus to be a successful city where people believe that they and their children have a say in their future. We want people to be engaged in civic life and enjoy gathering together in public spaces, and we want to be able to more easily get around for either recreation or transportation. We want this to be a city that attracts creative thinkers and entrepreneurs whose statistics show us increasingly choose where they want to live first and then either find or create jobs second. Our city's investments over the last 30-plus years are really starting to pay off in terms of property values, central gathering places, and a civic identity. And you don't have to look much further than our downtown area and along the Riverwalk, particularly on weekends when people come together and gather very organically and enjoy being there. I was down there a few weeks ago, and there was a wedding on the island above the rapid there, and it was so great to just get to watch people really celebrating being in this wonderful public space. Our work is attracting a lot of attention, our city's work. We're getting a lot of tourists. You know about the minimum grid project that's underway with Gell Studios and their public space and public life assessment of Columbus, and those things reports will be ready in September and October of this year, and I think you're going to be very pleased. We have a few other announcements that you'll be hearing about in the next few days. We're also learning from others, like with the Regional Prosperity Initiative, which is linking our area's cities, our area businesses, government, and nonprofit sectors to the public to develop a comprehensive long-range plan. And according to this Regional Prosperity Initiative report that came out in the last week, we face some enormous challenges related to education, generational poverty, and connectivity. But we believe that working together can put us on a great path. And some of what you've been hearing over the past year sounds like crazy radical thinking, bike lanes and narrowed lanes on the streets and spending money on making a city beautiful as well as functional. But statistics are telling us that these kind of investments pay off in helping to create the city that we all want to live in the future, and we want our children and grandchildren to stay in and become vital citizens of. So what I'd like to do, you guys have joined in with us on a lot of this, passing the Complete Streets policy, seeing Columbus celebrated as a bicycle-friendly city, and I really think those are exciting steps for our community. We come today to really share with you plans for sort of an important next step that a number of us are seeing, and I'm going to ask Ken Hinson to join us to tell us a little bit more about how we got where we are, and then I'll tell you about the plan.
A year ago, the Knight Foundation sent a group from Columbus to a Doable Cities conference in Chicago, and I think we had 10. I think Knight paid for 6, and I think 4 people paid their own way to go because they were interested in what the Knight Foundation wanted us to learn. And what they wanted us to learn was, at this Doable Cities conference, was they wanted us to see how other cities were connecting their civic assets and their civic commons to make it a more usable, friendly place to live. And so all of us went to that conference, and we came back, and we started meeting. And the mayor was at some of the meetings, and I think she hosted the first one. But after about the third meeting, a smaller group of us got together and said, we need to find a way to push the ball forward a little bit faster. And so we started looking around the state to see what other communities had done in this area to connect their civic assets. And we looked at the Beltline in Atlanta. We looked at the Silver Comet Greenway that had been built in Cobb County over a period of 10 years. We looked at what they'd done at St. Simon's, and there was one common denominator, and it was a group called PATH. And so we called PATH on the phone, and we said, look, we want to come up and meet with you guys and see how you're doing what you do. So a small group of us went up and met with PATH, and we learned that they were a nonprofit. They're not in it to make money. They've been doing it for about 20 years. They had figured out a way to build, it's not bike paths, it's multi-purpose trails, greenways that connect people. It's jogging, it's walking, it's women with strollers and biking. How they were able to build it less expensively, how they were able to build it quicker. And it's a 4-person group, and they were able to build their bike lanes for less than what we've been building the multi-purpose trails for less than what we've been building ours, because they are nonprofit. We've got a great city staff, John Huddleston, Zach Dorsey, Donna Newman, Rick Jones. They do a great job, but their specialty is not multi-purpose trails. And so that's all PATH does. And so We convinced them to come visit Columbus. We then set up a Greenway Fund at the Community Foundation. We went out and solicited donations, and we went out and we hired PATH to look at our multi-purpose trails that had been proposed. The Waterworks had a plan. You had an alternative transportation plan. So we paid for PATH to come to Columbus, and they have already, in less than 90 days, they have come up with a draft of what they call their RiverLink plan. And it's just a first draft, and we're going to work on that. And then we're going to also pay them to look at how to engineer the connection between the Fall Line Trace, where it ends now, and 14th Street. Our fund's going to pay for that. And as a part of this RiverLink plan, they have come up with a great plan that some of you have seen, connecting Martin Luther King out to Ilgers Road and then connecting it all the way downtown. They've also got a plan to connect Martin Luther King across by the museum and over to Lake Bottom Park. And so this is really just another public-private partnership. And we've got this fund at the Community Foundation that's interested in getting this started. And Betsy's going to tell you just a little bit more about PATH.
If I can make the slides work well. So what we've got in front of us is a bit of a shortened version of PATH's proposal of what they'd like to see us do. And it is, again, a first draft. So we want feedback from you guys. We want feedback from the public. More information. In fact, this full proposal is on the Community Foundation's website. There is a Friends of Columbus Greenway Trail Facebook page, or Friends of Columbus River Link, excuse me. So I'm going to flip through this real quickly. As Ken mentioned, PATH is itself a nonprofit. They enter into public-private partnerships with lots of different sectors and have attracted themselves a good bit of foundational funding from in and around Atlanta. So far, they've built actually over 230 miles of greenway trails, raised over $40 million from private sector for trail development, and caused $90 million to be allocated from public sectors. So how they partner, they provide the expertise and experience, they oversee design and construction, and they raise money in the private sector to assist with funding. And from Columbus, they would look for us to help with identifying city-owned property and acquiring additional green space, allocate some funding either from the T-Splost or other sources, and provide city staff support. These are just some pictures of what the Beltlines typically look like, these greenway trails. This is, of course, part of the Atlanta Beltline, which, if you're familiar with it, is boosting property values all over the city of Atlanta and really creating great ways for people to connect with each other. There's a green belt underway in Carrollton that Carrollton had figured it was going to take them 30 years to build a green belt that goes all the way around the city, and with PATH's help, they're about to complete it in 5 years. This is one of their state parks up in Rockdale County. Just really beautiful spaces where people want to be. DeKalb and Rockdale counties. They've done some work up in Beaufort, South Carolina, the Spanish Moss Trail. And what they say here is that we have fantastic assets with the Fall Line Trace and the Riverwalk, but they're missing links in that they don't connect to each other. And the surface street connections that we have are fine if you're somebody who's used to riding on bicycles and you feel very comfortable riding on city streets. Statistically, that's a very small percentage of your population. And as Ken mentioned, folks with baby strollers, they're not going to get on a city street pathway. So what they propose is instead river links. They see a 12 trail links, I can't say that, 27.5 miles of trail, which would give us in Columbus a total of somewhere around 60 miles of connected greenway trails. The estimated cost, they'll work on because each project is going to be managed separately. This is the big thing. They believe that we can do this in 5 years, which would be transformational for our ability to attract and retain talent, and I think transformational in the way we communicate with each other. So here's a picture of the entire map. And counselors, you have hard copies of these ahead in front of you. The first leg that they propose to complete is connecting this fall line trace to the Riverwalk. And we'll walk through how they plan to do it. Coming south on 10th Avenue, turning onto Linwood Boulevard, again going south on 6th Avenue, and then turning west onto 14th Street. Here's a little bit of what they would propose that it look like. This is 10th Avenue looking south, so the medical center is off to the right in this slide. And you see on the left there the end of the fall line trace and the white path that goes across the street, and then it just continues down on Sharrows. They would like to see it look more like this, with safer signals, slightly narrowed lanes on 10th Avenue, colored markings on the street to signal to motorists that pedestrians will be crossing, and plantings in the middle, both to make it more attractive and, again, to signal something important is happening here. So now we're looking north on 10th Avenue, so the medical center is off to the left, and rather than look like this, they would propose that it look like this. So these are 12-foot wide. Basically, they look like sidewalks, but they're longer pieces of concrete, so you don't get that bump, 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 bump feeling as you drive over them. Looking west on Linwood Boulevard would go from something like this to something like this, with a cutout for a bus plaza. And then this is 14th Street as you look towards the river, so total system is on the right, and it would go from something like this to something like this. One of their suggestions to us is that we really should use that fantastic asset of the Riverwalk and bring it up onto land so that people signal you're approaching something that's important for this community. Right now, if you're downtown, it's a little hard to find the Riverwalk. So this would make it visibly something that leads you farther down. The next leg, and we would propose to, we're going to try to do these concurrently, would be do the fall line trace to the Riverwalk connection, sort of bracketing the northern side of Midtown to the river, and then coming along Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard on the south side of Midtown, and again connecting to the river and to the Riverwalk. Right now, this is the part, this is the only place on Martin Luther King where they think they would have to bring it to 3 lanes. So this is 4 lanes now, and it would go to this. Along beside the Y, what you see is a sidewalk that's too narrow, and we know this because that's called a desire line in the dirt. See, I've learned all these great new terms. So that means that people wanted to walk side by side, but the sidewalk wasn't wide enough, so one person had to walk in the dirt. So rather than that, you'd have this. And then this is where they're proposing to bring this in downtown. This is that park along where the Keep Columbus Beautiful office is, right? Was. And the railroad is not going to be in use in the next, I forget what the time limit is, but soon. So they're thinking it should come along like this and have easier access to the Riverwalk. I'll pick up in speed on some of these other things. They've got some ideas about 10th Street Plaza, again, making that a main gateway to the Riverwalk and bringing that Riverwalk up onto land. This is what it looks like now. They would propose that it look like this, where the plaza level comes up to the level of the curbing. You still have cars that can go down there, but it signals to everybody this is a shared space. So pedestrians, bicyclists, and cars all share the same spot, but it looks important. You could even do something like this that signals at Front Avenue that this is something coming up that's exciting. The entrance down onto the Riverwalk is very narrow for bicyclists. And if you remember, there are 2 ramps like this. One is for, well, they're actually both for handicapped access, and they sort of cross each other. So PATH proposes taking one of them to look like this and leave the other one like it is. They'll still cross each other, and they'll make that crossing safe, but this creates an easier way for people to come up and down that ramp. And then they also think we should do a link either at 6th Avenue or 5th Avenue. I know we've just done 6th Avenue, so we may need to think about that. But that would begin to create the system of links. And now I'll just kind of click through some of these other things that they're thinking that they see as we get down off of Oxbow, around Oxbow Meadows, connecting the Infantry Museum to this new South Lumpkin Rail Trail, eventually coming along behind Dinglewood Park, connecting to Lake Bottom and going, north to the Fall Line Trace. Ken mentioned that the Waterworks had done a plan called the Creek Walk that they've incorporated into this plan, and it's using Waterworks right-of-ways to connect parkways throughout the city, which is lovely. Full kudos to the Waterworks for coming up with such a great idea. So you begin to see that people can use any of these either for recreation or for transportation. You can even go all the way out to Woodruff Farm Road Soccer Complex, connect Corporate Ridge, and then go north to Cooper Creek Park, and again the Fall Line Trace. So you really are beginning to touch most of the neighborhoods in Columbus. And the last is a link up to the marina, almost to Green Island. So this is their system. There are lots of ways to improve this, and we'd like people's suggestions on how to make it better. One of the ones that we've heard of is people want us to kind of look north-south for something that would connect the Fall Line Trace to Rigdon Road to the Civic Commons site at the library, and then go south to take people down eventually on Martin Luther King. So they're kind of looking for those avenues. But I will say most of the comments we've heard so far have been from people saying, well, this is good, but I want more. I want this link. I want this to come by my neighborhood. I think that's exactly where we want to be. We heard from the people in Carrollton that when they started this work, their comments were, well, this is a great idea, but don't bring it by my business and don't bring it by my neighborhood. Just go do it over there. So they started, and now that they've gotten around to the end, people are fighting and saying, please, please, please bring it to my neighborhood, bring it to my business, because they're beginning to see that it really drives commerce around the city and people linking together. They've even had a couple of neighborhoods cut their own private sidewalks to connect with their Greenway Trail. So next step, we're going to get as much feedback as we can, incorporate it into the plan, finalize a master plan and implementation strategy, bring that to the City Council for adoption, and then hopefully start implementation of the initial trail projects in early 2016. To learn more, people can visit the Community Foundation's website at cfcb.com or on Facebook at the Friends of Columbus River Link. But it's an interesting idea. Hope you agree. Do you have anything to add?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. We have a few questions here. We have Councilor Huff. Hold on a second, Councilor Huff. I don't know why it's... Can you flip that on over there just in case? It seems to be... Here we go.
There we go. Good evening. How are you both?
Doing great.
I appreciate the efforts, and I just wanted to go public and say thank you because I had such an interest in Martin Luther King and all it represents, and for the public to know that the trail will be done, and we will only lose about a quarter of a mile of the entire road to complete the trail. Yeah. So thank you for your consideration, and plan looks real good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's see. We have Councilor Barnes.
This is really innovative. As you know, and Mayor, you mentioned yesterday that you were in Copenhagen.
Yeah, all right.
You can see you were in Europe. So you see this is exactly what they have throughout Europe. And so I'm really glad to see that Columbus is moving in this direction.
Good.
So.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Councilor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate all the work you've done in the presentation. I just wanted to, again, ask about what we talked about at the meeting the other day. What was the amount of money you're looking to raise for this? Is that?
We're not sure to do the whole thing. It's probably going to be somewhere total in the neighborhood of around $25 million. So it's not small change. And if we do it over 5 years, we can spread it out. But it's a significant investment in the city.
The only thing that concerns me about it is at some point these become linear parks, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong.
No.
And then at some point the city will be asked to take ownership, right. And with that we all know that we receive some beautiful parks,
right,
that the citizens will be happy to utilize. But with that comes the maintenance of the parks. and that's where it hits us. We hear about the joy of riding the bikes and the interaction and everything, everywhere people get to go, but every year we have to struggle with the financial side of that. And I think what we talked about, and I believe the gentleman that was making the presentation at the meeting said that it was possible. And what I think I asked for consideration was to look at raising an additional amount to give us a cushion to help fund the maintenance of this type of program. So I just want to repeat that for council's benefit and city manager and the mayor and the viewing audience to try to help steer that forward so that we wouldn't be struggling to try to maintain something that's presented to us that does help beautify the city.
Right. I think that's a super point. Yeah, certainly you don't want to receive a gift that's going to cost you money in the long run to maintain. And I will say that Path's designs, the concrete is 5 inches thick. It's lower maintenance than what we have now on both the Fall Line Trace and the Riverwalk because they're asphalt. So there's some advantages there, but you're right. Over time, anything is going to degrade and you need money. Certainly, we'd be amenable to a Friends fund that would be ongoing to help provide operating costs. I know in Carrollton, their Friends group had just bought, I don't know what you call it, but it's like a trailer, a blower trailer that you tow behind a city truck. And so rather than have somebody who has to go out with a blower after a storm and physically blow one place off, you just pull it behind the truck and you can do the whole trail pretty quickly. So there are ways to do it, and other people are doing it, and we'll figure it out. How's that?
That sounds great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, we have Councilor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. And Betsy, you and Ken, we appreciate your and the Foundation's leadership in this. When I got my first look at it, I thought it's just an incredible job. Those guys know their stuff. They went through the planning phase. They tried to identify the key areas, which would make this a truly functional circumnavigation sort of the community, and tying different parts of the community together, which I think is great. And I'm committed to trying to find ways to make this happen. But I did want to, Councilor Allen made one of my points. Part of making it happen is identifying ongoing funding for maintenance, and on the front end of that, identifying ways to minimize that maintenance. So I think it's encouraging to hear some of the things that are being done elsewhere. And also just wanted to make sure that folks understood. Councilor Huff said that I think what he meant was, I'll let him answer, but that as this gets done, he's excited that it's not going to take up much of Martin Luther King, and I'm excited by that too. But this is not something that's in motion yet in terms of funding or planning when to begin. I think this is just sort of the brass ring we're reaching for, and I'm excited about trying to find ways to make it work. But it's not something that is currently in our budgetary plans to do. This is something that again, I appreciate your leadership in bringing it to us with sort of a funding mechanism already built in to some degree.
Well, that to us, you're exactly right. To us, that's one of the advantages of working with PATH. Rather than the city having to fund trail building 100%, as you've been doing with the Fall Line Trace and to an extent with the Riverwalk, this is something that allows private investors through philanthropy to come to the table and to say this is something that's important for us. PATH presents us with that proven mechanism. They know how to make this work. They know how to build these trails to a high-quality standard at a low cost. They look for public right-of-ways. They said they love a golf course where they can snake it along the side without disrupting people. The Georgia DOT routinely lets PATH build in its own right-of-way, which is kind of amazing. DOT works really beautifully with PATH. So we think there are a lot of opportunities that make this the time to move forward for us as a community. A lot of cities want to do business with PATH. It's almost like we had to apply. When we first called them, they said they'd be glad to meet with us, but we needed to come up there. And I think they thought in the next couple of weeks, and the way we do things in Columbus, we said, well, we'll come up Thursday. And I think they were a little taken aback by that. But they hadn't been, most of their principals had not been to Columbus in 25 years. And when they came down here, they were blown away. They said, you've got this fantastic set of bones, and what we need to do is work to connect them and make it more accessible for all your citizens, and you're just going to see great things happen. So,
Councilor Davis.
Thank you for the presentation. You got to start somewhere, and that's a plan. In this case, it's a master plan, and I just want to thank all those who are responsible in contributing to make this possible. You go up in Atlanta, it's real easy to hear the buzz up there of all that's going on, especially with the Beltline. And if you've been in some of the areas, the blighted areas where the Beltline has run through, and you've seen the growth, the significant growth, and the activity down there, it's just amazing. So I'm excited that we here in Columbus have the opportunity to work with a first-class organization. Not only that, I would consider them the major leaguers of putting these trail systems together, and they've done it in Atlanta, and they've been very successful. The Silver Comet Trail, like I said, we all have friends. They'll tell you, they're always out there trying to find ways to recreate. But I think this is a great opportunity, not only today, but in the future, for our citizens to find a way to get out of their neighborhoods, and to be, instead of cooped up in their neighborhoods, to be able to get out and to be able to enjoy the city and recreate and have that type of physical activity. And we all know, if you start looking at the impact, the studies and all that are out there, this is what the next generation is looking for. And they're migrating to the workforce. The younger workforce is migrating to the cities that have these types of amenities, and it's just a great thing. But I wanted to share a couple thoughts. I agree with Councilor Henderson and Councilor Allen in the aspect of, a rainy day fund and looking at things like that. It's always prudent and wise to do that, especially when we have our challenges here. But, the beauty of this, when I really got to thinking about it, what's interesting is that a majority of what we're talking about is probably over 80% on the city right-of-way.
Yep.
Well, to me, if you, just depending on how you look at it, it's less grass to cut, it's less maintenance, and might even help you out from that standpoint, but you're dealing with city right-of-way, and you have to maintain it anyway. So from that standpoint, it could, at the end of the day, could be a plus for everybody, because really, if the trail is solid, all you got to do is just blow it off here and there. And we're already planting trees and upgrading things in our community now. So it just goes hand in hand from that standpoint. So thank you all. And again, thanks to the people who have stepped up to make something like this possible. Like I said, it's a master plan. It's a start. Yeah. But you have to have a vision. And we appreciate Betsy, you guys at the Community Foundation and all our significant contributors in our community to make things like this happen.
Thank you. Lisa, did you want to add something before we go on with the discussion?
Just something briefly. I do want to say, Councilor Davis, we do look forward and like the idea of less grass to cut, first of all, but want to thank Betsy for her presentation. We do have a master agreement that we like to pass around for your consideration, although we're not asking for anything today. I think the city manager just want to be able to bring this back perhaps at the next meeting or another meeting, but wanted you to have an opportunity to take a look at it. So she's passing that around now.
No, not voting today. All right, Councilor Thomas.
Betsy, I've shared some of the thoughts from some of my fellow councilors. I think this is a terrific idea. I don't ride bicycles and I don't walk if I can help it. But it's beautifully done, and there are so many in our community who do and who would benefit from all of this. One of the questions that I have is about the timeline. For example, I know that one of the places that Pat had looked at was the Riverwalk connection at City Mills. And I know that we're in the process, we the city are in the process of doing some things. And I don't want us to butt heads, and overlap there. We want to make sure that it's the right thing. So do you have any idea about timeline, when we may get started on some of this?
Ideally, PATH would like to start in January of 2016. If we can get funding together that quickly, they're ready to roll. I mean, well, they're not now, but they will be.
Okay.
They do things quickly. They see those first two priorities as being, the first is fall line trace to the Riverwalk, because they say the way that we're doing it now can just so quickly be improved. But we'd also like to add that Martin Luther King leg to the first part of it, depending on what funding is available. So we're trying now to get a sense of how much money that would take to complete those two legs.
I guess one of the things that really strikes me as very important is that we are talking about the Riverwalk at City Mills. We are talking about doing something on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, and those plans are already beginning to take some shape and to move. And so I don't want us to get too far, if we're going to make some significant changes, that we get too far ahead of what's going on. And I think that one of the other really big things about Columbus is not only do we partner, public-private partnership financially, but we partner in planning. And it's not unusual for our planning department and engineering department to work with someone like PATH to make sure those kinds of things are done. The other thing that is that I would want us to be sure of is, while this map looks great and where these places, where these trails are, let's put them in, but I want us to make sure that they're where they need to be.
Absolutely.
The one that immediately comes to my mind is the one by Dinglewood Park and in front of Columbus High School and down by the Country Club.
Right.
We had a gentleman at our last council meeting who was representing the neighborhood over there around Columbus High School, saying, we don't have enough parking, and the kids are parking on the street and in front of our house and messing things up. Well, if we have, this kind of path, what impact is that going to have on the parking that's there? So some of those kinds of questions and discussions need to be had. I don't know if they looked at Columbus High School when school was in session.
Yeah.
It's a really different piece when they're in session than during the summer months. So some of all of that, I think, is what we need to take a look at.
I think that's a really important point, Councilor Thomas, and I will tell you that what the PATH folks tell us is that while this is a master plan, which itself can be tweaked, so we want input on it, each of the construction phases would be their own separate project. So there would be public meetings, there would be a chance to look at things. That stretch that you mentioned hasn't been designed yet. They've driven along there, they've ridden their bikes along all these areas, and that's actually one that came out of the Creek Walk design that came from the Waterworks. But exactly what it would look like through there and how it would function, they don't know yet. So they would develop it, there'd be public meetings, there'd be plenty of chance for input. This is not something that would be imposed on the people of Columbus. This is something that people would get to participate in. As you point out, it's just how we do things.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I think that concludes discussion. I just want to add my thanks, Ken, to you, Betsy, always for you. It's amazing. And this is only one of the many opportunities that the Community Foundation has in the pipeline for us. So thank you for all you do.
Sure.
Really appreciate it. Great discussion.
Thanks.
All right. With that, we'll turn to the minutes of our City Council meeting, June 9th, executive session. These were provided to you previously. And let me just ask if there were any corrections or additions that anyone saw that we need to make. Seeing that there's none, can I get a motion for acceptance? We've got a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please state aye. All right. Thank you. The minutes are approved. And at this time, we'll move into the city attorney's agenda. Mr. Fay.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Got a few business items to cover. The first one up is our ordinance that would change the annual leave, sick leave policy and the Columbus Police Department pay reform restructure plan, eliminating gap time, and it's on the table for discussion. All of this has been briefed at various times before council.
All right.
Any questions on that?
I don't see any questions at this time.
All right. We'll bring it back at the next meeting for a vote. Next item is changing the official street name for part of Gunboat Drive to Chastain Drive. And this was, I believe, sent to Board of Honor. Board of Honor has taken